This is the real research that I have heard, that I have talked to Army generals, commanding generals, major generals, generals, CIA, everybody, and they're all 100%. And it's unbelievable because, I mean, they 100% in San Francisco, and they are literally communicating, and they've got like astronaut level people taking super hardcore levels of drugs and going into meetings with these things and making intergalactic deals. And again, that's what the government believes and says they're doing.
So I worked as a nurse for about 10 years. Then my life took a terrible turn. I went through a divorce, and I started dating this guy named Lester. Now, Les was into the whole New Age thing. By the time we were dating 6 months, I started to discover that he was really into DMT tripping. Him and all his friends. By 7.5 months, he was encouraging me to give it a try, but I was so reluctant. My whole life, I'd never done any drugs. No cocaine, no marijuana, nothing, not even CBD oil. But I can tell you what changed my mind on using that drug. I had a terrible day at work. This 85-year-old woman comes in after suffering a massive heart attack. We're able to revive her and get her together, but then 2.5 hours later, she dies. The incidents of that night made me want to understand what was on the other side of the veil. I needed to know if there was something more than just this physical plane of existence that we currently live in. Where do we go when we die? My mind raced with all those type of questions. And based on what Les and his friends told me about their DMT experiences, it seems as if they were finding answers by doing this drug. So I decided to give it a try. It was a Saturday morning and Lester and I were at home when I decided to smoke it. I took a hit of the bong, and at first nothing happened. I remember him saying, "Sit back, I want you to lay down on the sofa so you won't hurt yourself." And the next thing you know, I started going through this freaking tunnel. Colors swirling all around me. The most beautiful purples and yellows and oranges. And colors that I had never ever seen before, just swirling like a kaleidoscope. It was the most amazing, beautiful thing I had seen. Then, lollipops. Candy canes with odd and weird colors popping from left to right, dancing in front of me. I mean, this was insane. I remember trying to move my arms to grab one, and that's when my body started to feel heavy. I felt as if I was sinking into the sofa and going underwater at the same time. That kaleidoscope began to slow down. The colors stopped, and then I found myself inside this forest. But it was freaky and weird. I wasn't standing in the forest. I was above the trees looking down at myself in the forest. But the trees were this royal blue color. And from my perspective, it was as if the trees themselves were breathing. They had this vibrating kind of motion to them. This swaying light back and forth. Not as if a breeze was blowing, but as if they were actually sucking in air and were alive. It really, really was a beautiful sight to behold. I walked around amongst those trees, moving back and forth, but not from being on the ground amongst them, but above them. That's when the trees started to sway heavily. And I don't know if you call this my consciousness or my mind, but I was yanked from about 10,000 feet in the air above those trees down to the ground, to where I realized how tall and big they were. And that's when I heard it. This breathing sound, this heavy breathing, and this light growl. Then, from above the trees, I see this giant wolf. And I swear to you, it looked exactly like the Egyptian god Anubis, walking taller than the trees. He walks up to me, parts the trees, and looks down and says, "Worship me." I'm standing there looking up at this gigantic wolf, these yellow glowing eyes. And it says, "Worship me." It commands me to worship it. Worship me now. I don't even know how to explain what I was feeling at the moment because I wasn't quite scared. It was more of being confused, trying to figure out what this was or who this was. Then it said again, worship me now. I started to feel uncomfortable and I wanted to turn and move away. And as I turned my back and planted my feet to walk off, they were sucked into the ground and turned into these blue tree limbs. Then it spun me around and said again, worship me. And I said, who are you? Worship me was the answer. What are you? Worship me. I'm not worshiping something I don't know. I refuse to. Worship me now. I am the Spirit. I am the Great Spirit. Worship me now. This is really starting to freak me out at this point in time because I got a 30-foot tall freaking talking wolf telling me to worship it. So I asked the question, who worships you? Then it kind of smiled, showing its teeth and said, many worship me. Will you worship me? My feet started to feel as if they were both hot and cold at the same time, this searing pain running up my legs and into my thighs. Worship me or die. I swear to you, it felt like I was with that thing for 5 hours. It commanded me over and over and over again to worship it. And then finally, the kaleidoscope started again. Colors started dancing around in front of me. The trees faded away. These little bitty babies started flying left and right, up and down, purple, pink, yellow, green children. And the next thing you knew, I was coming out of the DMT trip. When Lester asked me about what I saw, and I told him I saw the god Anubis and that it wanted me to worship him. He pulled out a little notebook and started writing the details of what I told him. Then he got on the phone and started calling some of his friends. About an hour later, we're sitting there having hamburgers. He says, well, I talked to everybody and nobody's experienced anything like what you talked about. For the most part, it's been the kaleidoscopes, colors, and freaky little weird beings, but nobody's experienced a gigantic wolf. As Les sat there biting into his hamburger and stuffing his mouth with french fries, he said, the only thing I can think of is maybe, just maybe, it's because you listen to all that Dogman encounters. Maybe you made some kind of spiritual connection with the being itself.
This happened when I was 18 years old and I lived in Mississippi. It was the summer after high school and I had no direction. My mom was to me about staying in the house all day and not being productive. I decided to get a job with my friend Lucas at Waffle House. Figure I could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, hang out, and save some money. As it turns out, they moved Lucas back to the day shift. During this time, part of my job was taking out the trash. For some reason, they wanted me to take the trash out in the wee hours of the morning. I don't know why you need to take the trash out at 2:30 a.m. Later, I learned that the manager had an unwritten rule. The new kid on the block got the nastiest work assignments. You know, cleaning bathrooms, taking out the trash, dealing with drunk, unruly customers. That kind of stuff. That was my responsibility. Now let me say this. I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out that I was the work. The first time something strange happened, it was early on a Saturday morning. I'm taking out the trash. It's around 2:30 a.m. and I hear this growling sound. It sounded like a dog, but it was much louder and bigger than any dog growl I ever heard. In fact, the growl was so loud that the plastic dumpster lid started to vibrate in my hand. Needless to say, I threw the trash in the dumpster and I headed back in real quick. The next morning, the same thing happened again. And after that, I refused to take out the trash for over a week. During that time, I was waiting to see if anyone else would say they experienced something weird. But nothing. Now, I'm thinking I'm going crazy, and I decided to let go of the fear and get back to my job. It was about a week later. It was a Thursday night, early Friday morning, and I'm back there taking out the trash. The person who worked the day shift had left early, so there was a lot more trash, maybe like 5 trips. On my 3rd trip, I hear the same growl again. And this time, when I looked over to the wood line, out steps a creature that looks like a wolf. It was standing on 2 legs. It had long black fur, long black ears, and it looked like it had gotten into a fight. There were scars and scratches on its rib cage and shoulders. It looked at me, looking at him, then it dropped down on all fours, and it ran back into the woods. I went inside, and you know how you get in a zone when someone is talking to you and you hear them, but at the same time your mind is not processing what's being said? That's how I was. I just stood there for about 5 minutes, watching people walk back and forth, and when I finally snapped out of it, my manager was asking me to finish taking out the rest of the trash. Screw this, I said. Walked out the front door, hopped in my car, and I went home. I'm not sure if that was a Dogman you've been talking about, but I also don't want to know. A month later, Lucas quit too, right after he got moved back to the night shift. For the longest time, he wouldn't tell me why he quit, but when he did, it was because he saw the same thing too.
Hey! If any of you are looking for any last-minute gift ideas for me, I have one. I like Frank Shirley, my boss, right here tonight. I want him brought from his happy holiday slumber over there on Melody Lane with all the other rich people, and I want him brought right here with a big ribbon on his head. And I want to look him straight in the eye, and I want to tell him what a cheap, lying, no-good, rotten, four-flushing, low-life, snake-licking, dirt-eating, inbred, overstuffed, ignorant, blood-sucking, dog-kissing, brainless, dickless, hopeless, heartless, fat, bug-eyed, stiff-legged, spotty-lipped, worm-headed sack of monkeys he is. Hallelujah! Where's the Tylenol?
I cannot stand Christmas. And I mean it. I can't stand the holiday. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Jesus and the whole concept of Christmas being his birthday, but I don't like the fact that the tradition of Christmas is all about spending your money. Money that you don't have. On top of that, every year my wife wants me to decorate the house. Now, we live about 2 miles away from the nearest road. And then, on top of that, there's the light bill that comes after Christmas. It's like a late Christmas gift. Then there's the endless rows of lights and checking the bulbs and Christmas. You know what it is. Now that I've got that off my chest, this particular Christmas, my wife Sarah was excited like every other Christmas. And I don't know where she gets this from. Maybe when she was a kid, she didn't get a lot of presents for Christmas, but I think this whole thing is a matter of her overcompensating for her childhood. Don't get me wrong, I love my wife. She's my best friend. But I hate doing all this for Christmas. It's kind of like the kid who never went to Disney World. They grow up to be an adult, then they go to Disney World every year. I mean, like, how many times do you need to see Space Mountain, right? Anyway, Sarah comes home with these light-up reindeers that she wants on the roof and a blow-up Santa. This thing has an air pump, and it blows air into it, and it goes up to be like 9 feet tall. She pulls all this crap out of the car, and it's like, baby, this is going to look so beautiful. And again, I love my wife to death, and even though I'm talking about her right now, she's the best woman in the world. So I start the process of setting up the lights on the house. Then the lights in the bushes. Next, the lights on the roof. And I'm trying to get these damn reindeer to stay still on the roof because they keep sliding down. After about 6 hours outside in the cold, all I have to do next is inflate the damn Santa and strap them down, and then I'm done. So I finish. I go inside, I get Sarah and the kids, and guess what? She's right. The thing looks amazing. Never mind that she did absolutely no work. All she did was go to the store and buy it and take the box out of the car, but it was absolutely amazing looking. Wife and kids are happy. Christmas comes and goes. Now, Sarah has this rule where all the Christmas decorations have to stay up until New Year's. So every night she will go outside and plug them up. This particular night, she went outside to plug them up. And when she came back in, she said, boy, it's quiet out there. It's so quiet, it's scary. Me, I'm thinking nothing of it because I'm watching ESPN. A few hours later, I fall asleep on the sofa and I wake up, my wife is in bed. Now I'm in the kitchen, grab me a glass of water when I see this shadow go past the front window. A huge shadow. And I'm like, who the hell is outside of my house? Now the only light that's on inside of the house is this little ugly troll lamp that my mother-in-law gave us as a Christmas present. So I creep up to the window and I peek through the curtains, and that's when I saw it. It looked like a black wolf on all fours right next to Santa. Now, this wasn't strange to me. because we have wolves in the area. So I figured this is going to be interesting because this wolf is about to piss all over Santa. This is going to be funny. Well, it was all fun and games until this thing stood up on two legs, and I got a much better look at it. It had to be about 300 to 350 pounds, and that's when it starts biting Santa, snarling and growling. Then it drops back down on all fours and ran off into the wood line along the side of my property. At first, I thought I was dreaming. You know how you wake up inside a dream, but you're still dreaming? That's what I thought was going on. I figured, this is some type of metaphor for how much I hate Christmas, so much that this wolf bit Santa. So I pinch myself, and the pain lets me know that this is real. A giant wolf has just chewed on Santa. So I walk into the bedroom. I got in bed with my wife, still in disbelief. The next morning, when she went outside to turn off the lights, I hear her saying, "Santa's broken." But when I went outside and took a look at it, Santa had a piece bitten out of him right at the back of his neck. And that's when I realized, for sure, I was not dreaming. Also, that whatever this thing was, it was big enough to bite something 8 to 9 feet in the air. I haven't seen it since. I didn't tell my wife about it. Next Christmas, though, I'll do all the lights and the reindeer, but I'm not putting Santa back up. Luckau, Germany, Dogman encounter. Let me start by saying this. My family has owned this property in Germany since the 1600s. Farmland where we raise cattle. And since the 1600s, my family has split its time between raising cattle and fishing in a lagoon nearby. Now, I realize most of you listen to the story have never and probably will never visit Germany. This is beautiful country with dense forests and great people. And to this day, we still live by the old traditions. Neighbors helping neighbors. Now, as for what you call Dogman, my family has known about these creatures for centuries. Upright walking wolves. Yes, I said it. They walk on their hind legs, fast and strong. As a boy, I witnessed one of these things attack a full-grown bull, snap its neck, then shred this thing into pieces. That evening, I was with my father and we were crossing one of our neighbor's property, and I watched as this thing completely destroyed this bull. And it was on that day that my father shared this information with me. He told me that they migrated across borders around the lagoon into Poland and Lithuania, and these creatures had been seen as far away as Estonia. And I can still remember it. That evening, I was absolutely terrified, but my father just took a glance and kept on walking, pretty much ignoring this creature. Later, when we got home and I asked him, "Dad, weren't you afraid of this creature? How could you just walk past and ignore what was going on?" That's when he told me that they can smell your fear. It drives them crazy. And once you are afraid enough, then they would kill you and eat you. Sitting there across the table from my father, I know I had to be looking at him like he was crazy. But he went on further and explained to me that fear makes our blood smell stronger. And that same fear releases chemicals that makes our blood taste better to these creatures. That day, my dad told me, if you're not afraid, the creatures will just leave you alone. Fast forward 55 years to this day. We still own our family's land. And 4 years ago, we purchased our neighbor's land where we had that encounter. Now, on the backside of that piece of property, there is this hollow. Deep, spooky. I'm talking about a place where the sun doesn't shine in the daytime. And in the morning times, it holds this unnatural fog and moisture that makes the place like something out of a horror movie. And I remember venturing there as a young man My friends and I always believed that that place was evil. You could feel it when you were there. Standing at the top of that hollow looking down, you could feel it, like something was there waiting on you to venture down into the area. Now, as for my encounter with 3 of these creatures, it all started when my wife's dog took off running out of the back door early in the morning at 6:30. Picture this, we're at the table having breakfast and the dog bolts out of the door. Now, in my mind, he just needs to handle his business, so I'm thinking nothing of it. 2 hours later, I'm moving around back and forth around the house doing chores, and my wife says, "Hey, honey, where's the dog?" Again, we own a huge piece of property, so it's nothing for that dog to run off, get distracted, and then come back hours later. So I'm thinking nothing of it. 5 hours pass, and my wife mentions it again. But this time, the look on her face is one of worry. She says, "Honey, I need you to go find my dog. I have a very bad feeling that he's in trouble." So I hop on my side-by-side and start riding around the property looking for the dog. I ride the entire length of our original property. No sign of the dog. Then I move over to our newly acquired property, start riding around. Nothing. The only place left for this dog to be was hit by a car along the roadway, or he was back in that hollow. So I head on over in that direction. I started riding along the ridge line above the hollow. And that's when I start to hear him barking. Getting off the side-by-side, I say, "Hey, come here, boy. Come here. Here, boy. Here, boy. Come here. Come here." But nothing. Just this constant barking. Now, I didn't want to go down in this hollow, but at the same time, I didn't want to go back and explain to my wife that I didn't go down there to get her dog because I was afraid of what might be down there. So I started making my way down. And I just need to explain something to you. This hollow is steep. We ain't talking about going down on a gradual angle. I literally have to hold on to trees and grab rocks, sliding my way down. And when I get to the bottom, although it's about 2 to 3 o'clock in the evening, it's pretty much freaking dark down here. Picture this. I hear the barking and I'm moving along slowly, closing in on him. And being down there is like being submerged into a whole nother world. It's completely quiet down here with the exception of my dog barking. And listen to this. When I finally got to him, somehow my dog's collar was caught on this curved down tree branch. Looking at it, it was impossible for this dog to do this on his own. It was almost as if something or someone picked him up, slid his collar onto this branch, and gently placed him down on top of a log, essentially trapping my dog right there in that spot. Now, first I tried to pick him up, lifting him off the branch, but my dog is a German Shepherd and he's too freaking heavy for that. So now I'm down on my knees and I'm trying to unbuckle his collar when I start to hear movement coming up behind me. This quick, choppy pattering, like something is running up on me. And when I turn around, I find myself face to face with one of these creatures. These gigantic teeth and jaws, wet snout, and these piercing yellow eyes staring directly at me. Now pause for a second. Let me explain something to you about the size of these animals. The best way for me to describe the sheer mass and size of the head of this animal and relay it to you in terms of something that you may possibly understand is, if you're sitting down in a chair, any freaking chair, the area in which your butt rests on is about the width of the size of this thing's head. And to make you understand the size of this thing's eyes, take any spray can you can find, flip it upside down, and look at the bottom, and that is the size of this thing's eyes. It is there, right there in my face, snarling at me. I can smell every breath and feel the air as it comes out of its wet nostrils. That's how close, and in the back of my mind, all I could hear was my dead father's voice saying, "Don't show them any fear. They feed off fear. If it realizes that you are afraid, this thing will kill you. Now there is no way on earth that I'm going to sit here and lie to you and tell you I was not shocked, startled, and afraid. But you need to understand something, and what this boils down to is that fear ultimately is a choice. So I decided to turn my head from that creature, grab him by the back of the neck, stand up, and try to walk away. The dog is shaking, shivering, and urinating on himself. And then my dog starts to look around. Forcing my eyes to look as well. And in the distance, I see two more of these things, one on all fours and one standing up next to a tree. That's when it hit me. These sons of had set up an ambush for me. They wanted me down in that hollow. There's no telling how long they had been watching me and my family. And it was in that moment that I decided that, you know what? I'm walking back up out of this hollow with my dog, and I don't give a what they try to do. So I start walking off, literally dragging the dog, walking in the only direction where I wouldn't have a direct encounter with one of these creatures. And listen to me, every molecule of my body was telling me to run, but I refused to. I walked straight, upright, and confidently away from these creatures. We get about 10 to 12 yards away, and my dog takes off running up the side of that hollow and leaves me. And so now I find myself down there alone, holding on to trees, trying to climb my way back out of there. Behind me, I can still hear the breathing and growling of these creatures. I get halfway up the side of that ridge, and there's nothing but rocks on the ground for me to grab onto and start pulling myself up. And listen to me, when I finally turned and looked, that same one that was right up in my face was standing on two legs, head cocked to the side, looking at me. Reading its face, it gave me the impression that it was disgusted, like, this bastard is not afraid of me. And no, I was afraid. I just refused to show the fact that I was afraid. It took me another harrowing 15 minutes to climb back up out of that hollow. And when I got to the top of the ridge, I had to walk back around to get to my side-by-side and drive back home. Driving away and heading back home, my body was so pumped full of adrenaline that my hands were shaking and my eyes were twitching. I pull up to the house and my dog is laying there at the back door. And honestly, in that moment, I was pissed because he left me. So I kick him and go into the house. When I finally sit down at the table, my wife starts to question me about where I was and where I found the dog. Now she, like everyone else in the area, knows about these creatures. So when I start to explain to her what happened, my wife suggests that we contact one of the local lumber mills and actually donate the trees in the holler to them. That way, they would go down in there and cut them down for free, hauling all that lumber out of there and moving those creatures off of our property. And within 2 weeks, we had them out there cutting every freaking tree down in that holler. Now, I want to be extra clear with you. That didn't put an end to these things migrating across our property. But what it did was remove a place for them to congregate and hang out on my property. My wife and I both have seen them since then. And I'm pretty sure I saw one of them peeking into my house about 6 months ago. But I've never had an incident like that again.